Hello everybody, I'm back. Hopefully you're doing well. I'm just gonna get right into this one. First of all, if you're not familiar with this channel, yeah, I'm playing Minecraft, but I'm talking about Subnautica. Get over it, and that's partially because I can't be bothered to make a new save on Subnautica and play the game again. Because I don't want to immediately spoil people who click on the video. Yeah, I want to talk about Subnautica 2 because this is a game that I have been very, very excited for a very, very long time. I played the original, I played Below Zero, and they're both great. But Subnautica 2 just blew me away. Which, yeah, it's the third game, because the second game was technically supposed to be a DLC, but they chose to make it a basically full price game, and it wasn't very good. But I enjoyed it. You know, I'm one of the few in that. And I hope that doesn't invalidate my opinion in all of this. I think that because so what I did is when it first came out, early access yesterday. I'm recording this on Friday. It came out on early access. I immediately sat down and just played the game nonstop for like basically 8.5 hours, and then I dicked around for another hour. So you can say I beat it in around 8 to 9 hours. And it was a great experience. And then what I did is I went back and I revisited the original Subnautica. I looked at like I tried to get rid of that veil of nostalgia, because it's just one thing how you remember something versus how it actually is. And that's something I've noticed. Of course, that literally applying to me as I'm playing Minecraft 1.8.9. But yeah, I noticed that Subnautica, the original Subnautica, does not hold up as well as I thought visually, which makes sense. I think it was made on the Unity engine versus now they're using Unreal 5, so that obviously gives them a nice graphical boost. But yeah, personally, I saw a YouTube comment on a video of a friend of mine, and I really liked how they put it, so I'm just gonna steal it. Straight up plagiarism, I know. And then the comment said, Subnautica 2 looks how I remember Subnautica 1 looking like. Or something along those lines. I think it was Subnautica 2 looks the way I remember Subnautica 1 looking, or something like that. And I think that that's a really good way of putting it, because the game is honestly really, really pretty. And there's a lot of mechanics that they've taken from the second game, from Below Zero, and implemented that I think I have a little mixed opinions about. Personally, I like them. I know one of my friends who played the game as well, or is playing the game. Like, they haven't finished it, so their opinion's like completely invalidated. They don't like the features. And I think the most notable, spoiler-free one, is that in Below Zero there were these plants that you could interact with, and they gave you oxygen. And they kind of brought that back now. There's like a plant that it emits like a bubble of oxygen every, like, I think 20 something seconds, that refills your oxygen meter. And I think that's nice, because a big complaint that people have with the original Subnautica is that you have to constantly, early game, you have to constantly go out for air, and it's really limiting. But that's by design. That's the whole point of the game, right? There's this progression that puts it so that you don't have to be limited by that. And whereas here they've kind of kept the progression, right? Like there is still depth where your oxygen becomes less efficient. There is still you still have very limited time, but you can extend it if you're like deep in a cave with these plants. And I think it's definitely a good approach. And, as much hate as Below Zero gets, I think that they did a lot of things right in that game, and they've definitely taken that knowledge that they've gained over the 10 years. Because yeah, the original Subnautica like announcement was 10 years ago, so basically you can say they've had 10 years of work leading up to this early access of Subnautica 2, and they've definitely learned a lot over those 10 years, and they've implemented it masterfully. So Subnautica 2 looks great, but what I really, and this is what makes me, I would say I like Subnautica 2 more than the original or Below Zero, is that it isn't a complete continuation of the story in the first two games. I'm not gonna try to get too in spoilers just yet. If some people, because I know there's some people who want to play it or they haven't played the other games, I highly recommend you do. They're some of the best survival games out there, and they're great. Even the old one, it still holds up. Um, but I think what I really enjoy is that they're not limited by continuing the previous storyline that they had, because the first and second installments kind of followed the same premise. I think the second one was supposed to take place 1 year after the events of the first, or something along those lines. And so even if it had still a unique spin, it was still kind of orbiting the same. How do I put this without spoiling? It was orbiting the same like style, right? Because you're on this alien planet, and because you're on the same planet, there's some things that are kind of, they have to be consistent between the two games. Here, they have completely broken that norm. The entire time, the second you step out of your pod, or your whatever, the life pod, I think it's called, right? The second you step out, you immediately are questioning if you are even on the same planet as you were in the first two games. I was not sure for a majority of my playthrough. I was still wondering, like, is this 4546b? Is this the same planet, or are we in a completely different planet? What's going on here, right? Because you can't just walk up to someone and ask them. Um, and I think that the fact that it's not immediately obvious is good, because it means that it's refreshing. It means that I think the beauty of the games is really going into them blind, because Subnautica is very good at its progression and guiding the player into following its progression. I mean, the progression is somewhat linear, but still being able to know where to go next without too much yellow paint or any at all at times is great. It was great. And I really felt like I was playing the original Subnautica again when I was playing Subnautica 2. There was literally probably only one point in the entire game where I wasn't sure what I needed to do. And even then, I figured it out like 20 minutes later. Um, yeah. Okay, I'm going to go into some very light spoilers now, stuff that you're going to figure out in like the first hour of your gameplay or even less, things that are maybe stated in trailers, so I don't have to feel bad. Um, so there's a character called Noah, who's like basically it's like Chat GPT. It's this little AI assistant in your base, and it picks up signals of like people who died, like their black boxes. And it kind of points in the direction, because then it'll be like, oh, I found Dylan, who drowned in this little pit over here. Maybe you should check out what he had to say. And so, okay, you go there, you interact with Dylan's little black box or whatever. And then you get a little bit of lore. He talks about like, oh, well, there's this guy called Jerry, and Jerry fucks up the coffee machine, and I don't like Jerry. Okay, whatever, that's the lore. But then also you'll notice like, okay, well, where he died, there's like a thing you can scan that helps progress a recipe, or maybe it's a base that you can explore nearby. So it does progression in that sense, where it's a light nudge. It is kind of yellow paint, because it puts a fat fucking waypoint on the map. This is something that Below Zero did, but Below Zero did it much more obnoxiously. And I think that they've kind of hit a good balance here, because it's like you don't get the waypoint until you interact with Noah, and sometimes you're very far away from your base, and you get back like way later, or you forget to interact with them. And this is also something that I really didn't like in Below Zero, and I think that they've kind of rectified it here. So, I'm not a big fan of voiced characters in games, and the fact that the protagonist in Below Zero had a voice and it was very quirky, it really ruined my immersion a lot, because it's like in the first game, silent protagonist, and you have you're able to immerse yourself in it because your reactions are the reactions. I don't need a character to go, this is interesting. The game should compel me to come to that conclusion, to that reaction by my own. I should on my own say this is interesting. I should be interested in this. And this is something that I think I think Subnautica 2 does pretty well. Partially, it's probably done because there's multiplayer. The Subnautica 2 has multiplayer support, which I have not had the ability to test a lot, but I know that it is very, very fun. There is, it looks like all the vehicles and all the mechanics in the game are kind of geared towards promoting like these fun multiplayer interactions. There's like, for example, there's a eventually you'll be able to craft yourself a basically the equivalent of the sea moth. It's a small submersible. That's what I'll call it. It's called the tadpole. And it's cool because like, okay, you can pilot it and you can attach modules to it. So it's kind of like the sea truck from the second game, but then also it has the functionality that two people can grab onto it. You can have people grab onto the side. So one person can pilot it and then two people kind of grab on. So you could say it's technically a 3-person vessel. And I think that's cool that they added features like that. Yeah, definitely the multiplayer was the biggest thing that I was excited for, and they didn't disappoint with that. They also completely revamped the base building mechanics from the first and second games. You have a lot more creative freedom with how you want to build. And there's an absolute abundance of resources everywhere, so you'll never really feel like you have to hunt for minerals. This is actually something that I found very impressive because I have fond memories of, in both of the games, having to spend hours of time looking for like silver, or having to either at some point give up and like look up a map or a guide or something. And here I didn't. First of all, here I did not have that because the game had literally just came out. There was no information about it, and I went into it completely blind. But even so, I was able to find stuff very fast. I was able to find silver. I was able to find lead. Plenty of titanium everywhere. So I don't think that problem was experienced here, because usually it's like, okay, you go to this base, it's really interesting, and then there's like a cave right next to it, and there's like silver there, and you take a mental note. Okay, if I ever need silver, this is where I go. Stuff like that. There is also a progression mechanic that's immediately introduced to you at the start of the game, and I really find it interesting, and I want to know where they're going to go with this, where it's kind of biohacking, which is like modifying your own DNA to give yourself adaptations. So like at the start of the game, for example, you aren't, you're in a crisis, and you aren't adapted to the water pressure of I'm not sure if it's water, just air pressure, just pressure in general of the environment that you're in. And there's like this little like flower plant thing that you can like touch, and then it gives you a genetic mutation, or I think they're called adaptations in the game, that then allows you to handle the pressure. So now you can function. And I think that's cool. And so far, currently, I think there's like, I think there's 4, and it looks like there's going to be 6 in the full game. At least how they designed it. And some of them do different things. Like one of them lets you eat the food, like which sounds stupid, right? But it's like your body isn't adjusted to the proteins and stuff of the alien life, and so you have to be able to unlock that. And I was like, oh, that's so cool, because as someone who had played the first 2 games, I instinctively grabbed a fish, cooked it, and ate it, and my body reacted negatively to it. And I was like, whoa, that was a little bit of a flashbang, a jump scare, if you will. Speaking of jump scares, the enemies in this game. Here's the thing. So I don't know if it's just the fact that I'm no longer like a little kid, but I've personally found the enemies in this game much less terrifying so far than in the first. And this might be a little bit of a controversial take. There were some where I genuinely avoided them, and there were some where I was like, "What the fuck is that?" Especially there's a Leviathan that you have to kind of interact with, because it blocks your main passageway to like the second third of the early access game. And that was a fun interaction, but still I found it somewhat easy to avoid, and I wasn't like absolutely terrified, as opposed to something like the Leviathans in the first 2 games. Maybe that's just a personal thing, and I'm sure that in the full game there'll be a lot more things to scare the shit out of me. But yeah, I think I'm going to take a pause here and just say, if you aren't sold yet, please do play the game. It's full price currently, but if you do own the first 2 Subnauticas, you do get a little bit of a discount. You could just wait. Honestly, it's your choice, but I think it's a great game. It's very fun with friends, but you can also play it alone if you're a chud like me. It's great. Okay, now that's gone, I want to talk about the lore, and it's partially where I think that the game is going to go, and my reaction to the last parts of the early access. So, first of all, I'm just gonna go right out and say that there's a reveal that we are really fucking far away from Earth and from all of civilization. And that makes me think that I don't think we are on 4546b. I think we're on a completely different planet. Partially because the alien presence, like the alien structures are different than the, what are they called? Like the precursors, right? These are called like axiom or stuff like that. They look very different. And we do see that there's a precursor structure, the Rosetta Stone. So I think the running theory is because we have confirmation that the ship that we were on took a unapproved or whatever, unsupervised phase gate skip. And they went through an alien phase gate. They probably went through a precursor phase gate that sent them to this planet because the precursors were allied with this alien race. Maybe maybe the precursors were like the Viltrumites, you know, from Invincible. Well, who knows? Point being, that this is not 4546b. I am 95% sure at this point it's not. There's no peepers, you know. One of the most iconic fish in the game. They were in both Subnautica and Below Zero. They are not here, and I think that is a pretty good indicator that we're on a different planet. I think the Leviathans are really cool. The Collector was an interesting interaction for me, but I was able to outrun it pretty easily. Scanning it was a bit of a pain. Would not recommend, but that's kind of with every single Leviathan. I think the Void is a little disappointing. I find the concept of the current Void Leviathan, I forgot what it's called, the one with like it has like multiple riding it. I think that's actually really cool. I think it's interesting, but at the same time, it doesn't really feel threatening enough. The lore of the game, there's like these 3 storylines, right? Where one of them is that there is this sickness with the tree. There's the other one where there's like you're trying to figure out what happened to the colonists, and there's a person who's trying to sabotage the whole colony. And then there's also the plot to figure out what happened with the axioms, right? And it kind of ends off implying, sorry, that we're gonna go to that tree. You know, the tree that they specifically told us not to go, so we're obviously gonna go there. And we're going to go underneath it, and there's like an ancient dormant city there or something. And that sounds so exciting. Now, here's where I'm gonna theorize a bit. So first of all, if you look at the map currently, the tree is really fucking far away. It's way further than I think most people realize. So if we're going to go to the base of the tree, I do not think that there's going to be regions and biomes all the way there. Some people are saying, wow, there's going to be like so many biomes because you're going to have to go all the way to the tree. No. And the reason I have this theory is because we can see in the game files that there is in fact an equivalent of the Cyclops called a Trident submersible, which is specifically stated as a void exploration vessel. So I think that the game is unironically going to add content in the void, or at least some way to traverse it. And that makes it more interesting because I want to see more Leviathans in the void. I want to see stuff in the void, you know. Which, yeah, that's a stupid ask because the void is literally supposed to be fucking nothing. But if we're going to traverse it, I think that it'd be interesting to see what mechanics they introduce there. That would also help because they don't have to model like 7 trillion things. I found the ending of the early access really good because it put me in a position where I really wanted to know where is this story going next, and I felt very invested. And the entire time, you know, going into this blind and playing through it without really being able to access information ahead of time was really fun because I felt really smart. The fact that I was able to beat the game in like under 9 hours, I was locked in. I hit my flow state. Yes, so I very much enjoyed that. I think the only real complaint that I would have with the game is that there isn't fast travel at all. You know, in the first 2 games, there's teleporters that you can unlock at some point, and those are nice because it's like once you visited a place multiple times or you make some sort of investment, like with resources, you can assemble this teleporter that lets you fast travel there later for convenience. But since the first, I don't want to say half because I feel like a majority of the story and the plot takes place in on the other section, but the second region, right? The second plateau, where a good portion you spend a lot of time there, right? And the developers kind of intended that the fact that like immediately when you enter there, there's a fuck ton of resources, which is there probably so you don't need to go back and forth between the plateaus constantly and deal with the leviathans. Um, but still, it would be nice to have some sort of transportation between one section and the other. And maybe that's something that they just haven't gotten around implementing. That's the thing when it comes to early access. I find it very difficult to critique stuff when I don't really know how much of this is final, how much is not. And I've given them a nice wall of text with feedback and the like. Well, we'll see what they do with that. I think that in its current state is definitely very playable. I didn't really encounter any bugs at all the entire time I played the game. There was like one or two times when I felt the music wasn't playing the correct track in the region I was in. And then there was one time where I was able to clip out of the map. That's it. Everything else is completely fine, completely balanced. The game is enjoyable. The music's great. The graphics are gorgeous. And I think that it's really interesting that they are going with a very different storyline here, where it's like this weird tree of life, right? And then you have to figure out, okay, how do we save this tree? How do we, what's going on? Like, it's the first thing you see when you exit the ship, right? It's this massive tree, you deal with the roots, and you have to clear the infection. What I think, because you will notice they're called angel combs. There's like the things that give you the mutations, right? They grow off of the branches of the tree. And it's said that they are natural donors, or like they're compatible donors with our genes. I think that they're universal donors because it's like the tree is like the tree of life. It's universally compatible with all of life. And I think what's going to happen is that the more and more we mutate our bodies, the more and more compatible we are going to be with the tree, and the more the tree's influence is going to be exerted on us. When you're around these angel combs, you can hear like whispers of like asking to be freed, asking to be saved, and stuff like that. And I really want to see what they do with this. I want to see this plot twist where it's like, now you're one with the tree. Because, if the entire premise of the game is that the tree has this great influence where it draws its victims to it, and then it uses them as like fertilizer and kills them, that's not going to work if you literally tell the player that, and then the player's like, well, I'm just not going to go there, even if we have to, I'm not going to die. You can't force that. But the idea that the player will involuntarily do that because they don't realize that they're kind of prepping themselves to be the meal or whatever, right? By progressing the game, I think is actually a really creative approach to it, and I think that is what they're gearing up for. There's also the fact that the respawn mechanic, I really like that they have a canon in-game explanation for why you respawn. I feel like that was something that they had to do because in a multiplayer game it wouldn't really make sense. In single player, fine, you can just say you can say, oh well, time went backwards, or that wasn't the reality because you died or whatever. That's fine. But I think in multiplayer it doesn't really make sense, and I think it's cool that they are leaning into it by having the characters acknowledge their deaths and acknowledging that life is not really treated as such a fragile, valuable thing on this planet. I think that's cool. Last critique I'm going to have, there's too much text. Look, I'm a big fan of reading. I love Outer Wilds, which is basically just a reading and walking simulator. But I really wish that more of the data blogs and stuff are voiced over. Because whenever I explore a base or something and I find a black box or something of a character and they talk, great, I'll just play it and listen to it while I'm like exploring the rest of the base. That's fine. But if it's just like a wall of text, I'm not gonna just pause what I'm doing and start reading it while my O2 runs out. So I wish that they had more of it voiced over. And another issue I have with Noah, the AI, is like, he has all these options where he replies with the text,
and he'll start like speaking it out loud, right? But he talks so much slower than the text shows up, which would not be a problem except for the fact that if you trigger a thing for him to read it out and then you exit, he just stops reading it. It just like powers him off, right? I want it to be a thing where he tells me where to go, he says it verbally, and I don't have to like keep that tab open. I can meanwhile start like crafting something or whatever. I'm a big multitask speedrun kind of guy, and so, I'm interested in the story, but at the end of the day, if all you're gonna do is put some location on my PDA, I'm not really incentivized to sit there and listen to you read out a paragraph for 5 fucking minutes. Yeah, that's the current state of it. I think it's really cool. I like that they're going for a non-precursor aesthetic. I like that they're going for a very different storyline. They're not limiting themselves. I like that they're canonizing the death. The multiplayer is lovely. The game is beautiful. And even in its current state, which is a very, very unpolished, unfinished state, with much more content to come for sure, uh, I think it's a solid 8.5 out of 10. I'm not gonna give it a 9 because I feel like the 9 is gonna be the final verdict. I'm very picky about giving games 10s out of 10s. But I think it's like a low A, low mid A. Yeah, I would say it's up there with like Portal. Like it's a good ass game, very fun. With that, that's all I have to really yap about. I don't know. I just chopped down a fuck ton of trees. I didn't even do anything water related today. You know what? Fine. I'm gonna have to jump in some water to end it off. Thank you guys for listening to my little rant. I know it's not perfectly relevant to what I usually talk on this channel. I did one on Hytale, but I personally just can't be bothered to open up Subnautica 2, and I also want to progress this world more, and I feel like it's a little counterproductive if I just open another game. It doesn't fit with the branding. So with that, I hope you guys have a wonderful day.
So guys, we did it. We reached 250,000 subscribers, 250,000 subscribers, and still growing.